I have loved Marlon Miles for a full 10 years. He is naturally cold and aloof. Yet he has never opposed our marriage. I thought that he was also willing. Until that day, I braved the torrential rain to bring him stomach medicine. I happened to see the young lady of the cooperative company persuading him to drink alcohol. I stepped forward to stop them, but he spoke in a contemptuous tone. Do you really think you're the young mistress of the Miles family? Mind your own business. In the bustling bar, my tears fell together with the rain. Marlon, from now on, your affairs have nothing to do with me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful novels every day. Now the story begins. The lights and shadows in the bar intertwined. I held the stomach medicine in my hand, feeling icy cold all over. The playful and disdainful glances of the people around fell on me. But what stung me the most was Marlon's impatient expression. He has a weak stomach and must take medicine after meals, otherwise he will have a stomachache. I had called him several times just now, but no one answered, so I had to ask someone for the address of today's gathering. When I was almost there, it started to rain cats and dogs. It was exactly the rush hour, and for a 500-meter road, the navigation showed that it would take half an hour. I was anxious to send the medicine to Marlon, so I ran here in the rain. Under the dim light, Irene leaned against Marlon's arms, coquettishly feeding him wine. The man who always dislikes physical contact with others now let the girl in his arms do whatever she wanted to him. When I pushed the door open, her wine glass just touched Marlon's lips. There was an indescribable, ambiguous, and charming atmosphere. A pang of sadness welled up in my heart, and what came to my mind was the pale face of Marlon when he was suffering from his illness. I blurted out, "He can't drink alcohol." The crowd fell silent all of a sudden. I subconsciously lowered my head and saw that my black leather shoes stained with mud and water left a small water stain on the floor. I suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. But what made me even more embarrassed was Marlon's response. He leaned on the sofa and softly, "Ched, do you really think you're the young mistress of the Miles family? Mind your own business." Without even looking at me, he tilted his head back and drank the whiskey in the glass in one gulp. All the words that I hadn't had a chance to say stuck in my throat. I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. I could only desperately hold back my tears, trying to make myself look less embarrassed. Seeing this, the others tacitly averted their eyes, treating me like invisible air. When they walked back and forth, they carefully bypassed me. A girl couldn't stand it anymore and handed me a dry towel, but she was immediately pulled away by her companion. "Why are you paying attention to her?" The rain on my hair kept falling. The past events played out one after another in front of my eyes. I suddenly understood that Marlon didn't oppose this marriage. It wasn't because he was willing. It was because he simply didn't care. He didn't care about the agreement between Ms. Miles and Grandma. Nor did he care about me. To put it more bluntly, he disdained it. Because of his disdain, he remained silent when others said that I wasn't worthy of him. Because of his disdain, in his eyes, my full of concern was nothing but meddling, embarrassment, grievance, and anger intertwined. But in the end, they turned into a strange kind of calmness. I dried my hair bit by bit and quietly placed the stomach medicine on the table. I took one last look at Marlon. Then I left the bar without looking back. The lights in the Miles family mansion were still on. Ms. Miles and several of her friends were sitting in the living room drinking tea. I stood at the door changing my shoes, and the conversation in the room was clearly audible. "Selena, you don't really plan to let Marlon marry that little nanny, do you? I have to say, you're just too superstitious. Children are prone to getting sick anyway. Look, Marlon is all grown up now, and his body is in great shape, isn't it?" The speaker was Miss Miles' best friend. Ever since Marlon and I got engaged, she had been finding fault with me everywhere. She had said such things not only behind my back but also right in front of me many times. Ms. Miles sighed. "Rose is also having a tough time. She takes good care of Marlon. When Marlon gets married, I'll compensate her." Tears welled up in my eyes. I bit my lower lip tightly and suddenly remembered the way Ms. Miles had begged me not to leave with tears in her eyes. Marlon had been in poor health since he was a child. When he was 14, he had a life-threatening serious illness. In a hurry, Ms. Miles resorted to all kinds of methods and invited a very famous Taoist priest to take a look. After the examination, the Taoist priest took a fancy to me. He said that I had a rare lucky horoscope for my husband. As long as I got engaged to Marlon, his health would improve. Just like that, I, an orphan girl adopted by the Miles family's nanny, became Marlon's fiancé overnight. Marlon had always been cold towards me. When I greeted him, he would pretend not to see me. When I secretly looked at him, he would frown and turn around. Once he went back in advance due to something urgent. I didn't know that and didn't dare to look for him at school. So I could only keep waiting at the school gate. I waited and waited until it was dark and there was no one left in the school. Then I walked back to the Miles family's house with tears in my eyes. That day, I thought for a long time and finally mustered up the courage to talk to Ms. Miles about calling off the engagement. But Ms. Miles pleaded with me not to be angry with Marlon while crying. She also listed many things to prove that Marlon liked me too. I still remember a few of those words. Rose, Marlon is a child who doesn't know how to express his feelings. He doesn't say it. But in fact, he can't live without you in his heart. If he didn't like you, why would he go to school with you every day? Why doesn't he have any contact with other girls? Why doesn't he oppose this marriage? Just because of these words from Ms. Miles, I persisted year after year under Marlon's cold gaze. Ms. Miles also treated me better and better. Sometimes, I would even secretly imagine her as my own mother. But illusions are bound to be shattered after all. While I was trying my best to learn how to be a good wife and a good daughter, they had already unilaterally pronounced my death sentence. Even though I had lived in this house for 10 years, I didn't know if I should walk in at this moment. On the dark street, I called my college roommate Teresa. Teresa, is that offer of working in the United States you mentioned last time still valid? When I got back to the Miles family's house, the tea party had already ended. Ms. Miles' face darkened a bit when she saw that I had come back alone, and her tone was also reproachful. Rose, why didn't you bring Marlon back with you? It was as if I had deliberately left Marlon outside. But she clearly knew that no one could stop Marlon from doing what he wanted. In the past, when I heard her say such things, I would feel wronged. But more than that, I would feel uneasy. I was afraid that I might do something wrong and make her angry. But now, I just calmly stated the fact. He didn't want to come back. You should still persuade him even if he doesn't want to. You clearly know that he is not in good health. Who was he with? Why didn't you wait for him there? I lowered my eyes and didn't want to argue with her. Just his usual friends. And Irene. When Miss Miles heard Irene's name, her face immediately softened. Xiaohe was there too. Then, as if she suddenly remembered something, she frowned and gave me a look. I knew what she was thinking. She was just afraid that my presence would make Irene unhappy. I didn't feel anxious and try to be submissive as I used to when she was unhappy. I changed my shoes and went back to my room on my own, and started packing my luggage. I had very few things in the Miles family's house. I threw away what I could throw away, and the rest just filled a 28-inch suitcase. There was only one thing that I didn't know how to deal with. It was a teddy bear doll wearing a brown dress. Marlon gave it to me on the day Grandma passed away. The young man gently hugged me into his arms, and his voice was hoarse. Rose, don't be sad. From now on, I will take care of you. A hug and a promise out of sympathy made me think that it was proof that Marlon was different to me. The teddy bear stared straight at me, as if mocking my self-indulgence. I originally wanted to return it to Marlon, but then I thought about it. Even if I gave it back to him, according to his character, he would just throw it into the trash can without a care. I almost didn't sleep all night. I went downstairs with my things early in the morning. Marlon was having breakfast. When he saw the package in my arms, a trace of doubt flashed in his eyes. But he didn't say anything. As always, he didn't care. It was Miss Miles who asked, "Where are you going?" "Nowhere. I just packed some things that I don't need anymore and plan to take them out." Before I could finish my sentence, Marlon's phone rang. He responded a few times, then got up and put on his clothes. "There's something urgent at the company. I'll go there first." Ms. Miles reminded. "Drive slowly on the way." No one cared about my answer anymore. I smiled self-deprecatingly and went out to take a taxi to the mall. The Miles family has a driver, but I never use him. I also earn my tuition fees and living expenses by working part-time jobs. In this way, I maintained my poor self-esteem in front of Marlon. It seemed that as long as I didn't take advantage of the Miles family, I could be a bit more at ease when facing Marlon. In the most prosperous mall in City S, the lights were dazzling. I stood in front of the counter, thinking of buying a brooch for Teresa as a gift. A familiar voice came from behind, with a hint of coquetry. "Brother Marlon, do you think this necklace suits me very well?" I turned my head subconsciously. The tall and stern man and the charming girl stood together. and anyone would say that they were a perfect match. I just glanced at them and happened to meet Marlon's gaze. There was a trace of impatience in his eyes. "What are you doing here?" I knew that he was suspecting that I was following him. When he was in high school, he would go out to relax with a few friends every weekend. Miles was worried about him, so she asked me to follow him. But those young masters and ladies didn't like me. I didn't dare to refuse Miles, so I could only secretly follow them every time. When Marlon found out, I would lower my head and stammer, not knowing how to respond. But now, I pointed at the salesperson who was packing the item and said calmly with a composed expression, "I came here to buy a gift for Teresa. I'll leave right away." Marlon didn't quite believe me and frowned at me, but I didn't pester him or say anything more. From beginning to end, it was as if I had just met an acquaintance whom I wasn't very familiar with in the mall. When I got home, I knocked on Miles' door. After all, I had lived in the Miles family's house for so many years. Out of both affection and reason, I should say goodbye to her. When she heard that I was going to work in the United States, she stammered and asked me, "Going to the United States? Then what about your marriage with Marlon?" The words we said when we were children don't count. When she heard me say this, Miles pretended to complain, but there was a look of relief on her face. "You child, how could you make such a big decision without discussing it with the family? But since you've decided, just do as you like. You're all grown up, and I, as an aunt, can't interfere in your relationship matters. When are you leaving?" Looking at Miles, a pang of sadness welled up in my heart. It wasn't for others, but for my past self. "Tomorrow morning." So soon. This time, Miles was really a bit shocked, because tomorrow was her birthday, and every year on her birthday, I would prepare a surprise for her and cook a table of dishes with my own hands. Miles would hug me and joke, "Still, the daughter-in-law is considerate. That brat Marlon has never cooked for me." I paused for a moment and continued, "I won't attend your birthday party tomorrow, to avoid misunderstanding. As for what others might misunderstand, both Miles and I knew it very well." She also thought of this, and her expression was complicated. She hesitated for a long time and didn't say anything. I took it as her acquiescence. The next day, I went downstairs on time. Marlon was leaning on the sofa, carefully instructing the butler on the matters needing attention at the banquet. The fine black hair fell on his forehead, adding a bit of youthful charm to the always steady man. Irene was wearing a white evening dress and leaning against the armrest of the sofa. The two of them were so close that they almost stuck together. The suitcase was a bit heavy, and it made a clear sound when it bumped against the marble stairs. The people in the living room stopped what they were doing and looked towards me. "Sorry." I smiled politely and tried my best to lift the suitcase higher. Marlon took a few steps forward and pointed at my suitcase. "What are you doing?" His expression was still cold, as if he was asking about something insignificant. If it weren't for the noise that disturbed him just now and the fact that today was Miles' birthday, he probably wouldn't even bother to ask. I didn't want to talk to him more, so I gave a vague answer. "I have some work to deal with and I'll be out for a few days." Marlon took a step forward and his expression was indifferent. "Today is my mother's birthday. The matter is urgent. I've already told Miles about it." I tried to sidestep and leave, but he stood motionlessly in front of me, exuding an air of displeasure. "When will you be back?" "I won't be back." The words were on the tip of my tongue, but I didn't know how to say them. It really wasn't appropriate to say such words on this occasion. It was Irene who smiled and spoke. "Don't you make longevity noodles for Aunt G every year? Marlon said something to you a few days ago. You're deliberately not attending Aunt G's birthday today. People who don't know might think that the Miles family has done something to you." I pretended not to hear her words, pulled the suitcase, and quickly walked past the two of them. But Marlon didn't want to let me go and grabbed my wrist. The air was filled with a suffocating sense of oppression, as if the temperature had suddenly dropped a few degrees. Marlon's voice was deep and cold, and every word was filled with disdain. "You're just an amateur designer. What urgent matter could you possibly have? You're just mad because I didn't give you face in the bar a few days ago. Is it really necessary?" I stopped in my tracks. So Marlon knew that what he did would make me lose face and feel embarrassed. He just took it for granted that I wouldn't be angry. So he was so reckless. I turned around and looked at him seriously. My voice was not loud, but it was enough for him to hear. "It is necessary." "What?" Marlon's breath caught for a moment, followed by a long silence. It was only when I stepped across the threshold that he spoke. If you want to leave, do it on your own. Don't order the Miles family's driver around. It was pouring heavily outside. Auntie Anna noticed that the atmosphere was not right and came forward to mediate. Miss, it's raining so hard outside. If you really want to leave, you should at least wait until the rain stops. She didn't know that I was going to the United States, nor did she know that I couldn't wait for the rain to stop. Marlon's voice became even colder. Auntie Anna, don't try to persuade her. Auntie Anna was almost in tears and kept muttering, if you get caught in such heavy rain, you'll surely get sick. My nose tingled with sadness. I whispered a few words in Auntie Anna's ear, and then she let go of the hand that was holding me. Marlon didn't know that I had never ordered anyone in the Miles family around. The car that I had booked in advance had already arrived at the door. When I walked out, I could still hear Auntie Anna making her last attempt. Master, Miss, she really left. Marlon's reply was devoid of any emotion, and his words were as hurtful as ever. Let her go. Just make sure she doesn't come crying and begging me to take her back later. The Miles family's house was very close to the airport. After checking in, I still had a few hours to spare. I found a restaurant and sat down, then started looking at the design drawings. Teresa had almost everything ready on her end. She was just waiting for me to go there and start designing the first batch of ready-to-wear clothes. I lowered my head and sketched on the tablet, and my mind began to fantasize about my life in California. A life that belonged only to me, where I didn't have to please anyone anymore and didn't have to be a personal nanny 24 hours a day. Suddenly, the light was blocked. I was just drawing the lace details of the cuff, and I looked up impatiently. Excuse me, please move aside. What came into view was Marlon's face filled with anger. He stood in front of me, his hands in the pockets of his trousers. His slightly wet hair was sticking to his forehead, making him look a bit dejected. Rose, have you had enough of this tantrum? I was momentarily speechless. So in Marlon's eyes, not attending Miss Miles' birthday party and not enduring his cold words as I used to was considered throwing a tantrum. A sense of powerlessness washed over me. Instead of answering his question, I asked him back. How am I throwing a tantrum? I've already told you that I have work to deal with. I also informed Miss Miles in advance. Marlon sneered, and the rainwater slid down his unruly brow bone to his jawline. My mother has been so good to you. Of course, she wouldn't go against your wishes. She's crying alone in your room now. I admit I was wrong about what happened in the bar the other day. I'm apologizing to you. Okay. My brush stopped. I keenly caught the key words in Marlon's words. MS. Miles was crying. Then did she know that you came to ask me to go back? No. If she knew, she definitely wouldn't want to force you. As if to confirm Marlon's words, Irene's call came in. Brother Marlon, Auntie said that if Sister Rose doesn't want to come back, it's okay. Don't make things difficult for her. From the other end of the phone, there were voices of discussion. Selena, you're just too kind. The Miles family has provided for her with good food and accommodation. And how does she repay us? She leaves without even saying a word. I think she's just being pretentious, thinking that the Miles family can't do without her. I bet that Taoist priest back then was probably hired by her grandmother to deceive people. Yeah, there's no such supernatural thing in the world. Maybe that old nanny was the one who caused young Master G's poor health back then. My heart felt as if it had fallen into an ice cellar. I stood there, stunned, my body trembling. I was waiting for Miss Miles' response. After a few minutes, when the discussion had even extended to whether I would secretly climb into someone's bed at night, Ms. Miles finally spoke. She said, no matter what Rose has done, she will always be my daughter in my heart. She didn't defend me, nor did she stop others from making malicious speculations. Instead, with such a sentence, she confirmed those absurd rumors. Each word pierced my heart deeply. The last trace of hope in my heart finally vanished completely at that moment. I looked up and stared at Marlon. I'll go back with you. In the black Bentley. Marlon still had an indifferent expression. Seeing that I was silent and looking out the window, he consoled me in a condescending way. If you go back and admit your mistake now, Mom will forgive you. The Miles family knows what kind of people you and your grandmother are. You don't need to take to heart what others say. A sense of powerlessness overwhelmed me. He was always like this. When I was on the verge of collapse and going crazy, he would calmly say, don't take it to heart. It was as if I was being unreasonable. But it wasn't him, Marlon, who was being slandered. So of course he didn't need to care. The car stopped steadily at the entrance of the Miles family's house. I didn't wait for Marlon and strode towards my room. Miles was still sitting on my bed crying, surrounded by a group of noble ladies trying to comfort her. Bang! The door hit the wall. When Miss Miles saw it was me, a flash of panic crossed her eyes. Rose, why are you back? I threw my bag on the ground, and a dull pain surged in my heart. I'm back. Aren't you happy? Her best friend immediately stepped forward. Rose, what kind of attitude is this? Is this how you talk to your elders? Elders. I laughed bitterly. I'm an orphan. I only had a grandmother, and she passed away a few years ago. Which elder are you talking about? Mary was stunned on the spot, her face turning red with anger. She never expected that the Rose who used to just lower her head and apologize with a smile when scolded would talk to her like this. But there were always people willing to act as lackeys for the Miles family. A younger lady in the crowd spoke up. Miss Rose, which of your food, clothing, and daily expenses wasn't provided by the Miles family? You're just the granddaughter of a nanny. Without the Miles family, where would you get the money to study design? Everything you have today is given to you by the Miles family. You could even say that Miss Miles is like your reborn parents. Others chimed in as well. Marlon arrived at this moment, seeing the tense situation between me and Miss Miles. His eyes were as cold as ice. Rose, what do you mean by this? I retracted my gaze, even though I had already let go. My heart still ached uncontrollably. These were the people I had once considered my family. It's nothing. It's just that everyone seems to have some misunderstandings about me, and I want to clarify them. Marlon still frowned at me. Rose, is there anything wrong with what they said? What exactly do you want to clarify? I didn't look at him anymore and calmly said, first, my tuition fees and living expenses have nothing to do with the Miles family. Someone laughed out loud. It has nothing to do with the Miles family. Could it be that she earned the money herself? Miles also looked at me with a pained expression. Rose, I know you care about your face, but since you had a marriage contract with Marlon before, no one would say anything if you used his money to pay your tuition fees. Her face was calm, but there was a hint of dissatisfaction in her eyes when she looked at me. As for what she was dissatisfied with, of course, it was my lack of sense in coming back to the Miles family and causing a scene at the banquet in front of so many people. I smiled at Marlon. Mr. G, your mother said it's okay for me to use your money to pay my tuition fees. What do you think? Of course it's okay, Marlon replied instinctively. But halfway through, he suddenly looked up. Mom, weren't you the one in charge of Rose's school expenses? So that's how it was. Both mother and son thought that I had taken advantage of the other. No wonder they had been bossing me around. The other guests couldn't sit still either and exchanged glances with each other. All the people present were seasoned business people. Seeing the reaction of the Miles family's mother and son, they understood what was going on. Only Miss Mary, Miles' best friend, was still pressing the attack. Tuition fees and living expenses are just small matters. You've lived in the Miles family's house for so many years. Which aspect of your food, clothing, housing, and transportation wasn't taken care of by Selena? I ignored her aggressiveness and continued. Second, if we really want to calculate, it should be the Miles family that owes me. I lived in my own home before I turned 18. After my grandmother passed away when I was 18, I moved into the Miles family's house. Mary seemed to have found something to hold against me. That's been 5 or 6 years. You lived in a villa in the most expensive area of City S, and you ate ingredients that were airlifted from all over the world every day, leaving aside how much you've seen and experienced. Just the accommodation and food expenses alone are enough for you to pay back. And you still have the nerve to say that the Miles family owes you. Someone chimed in. Yeah, there were dormitories in the university, but she still commuted between the school and the Miles family's house every day. It's just that she disliked the dormitory conditions. When Miss Miles heard this, her expression softened a bit, and Marlon stared at my face, not knowing what he was thinking. I looked at the person who spoke and smiled slightly. My grandmother was Marlon's nanny, but after she passed away, the Miles family didn't hire a new nanny. Guess who did all the work she used to do? Surely they wouldn't ask a live-in nanny to pay rent as well. The room fell silent. Some people also remembered my past in the Miles family. Yeah, the little girl has been quite hardworking. I heard that the one in the Miles family has poor health and is picky about food, so she gets up at 5 every day to cook porridge. My son also told me that Marlon didn't care about any miscellaneous matters at school. And it was all Rose who was busy taking care of things. Didn't Lynn Selena say that she regarded her as her daughter? Is this how she treats her own daughter? Ms. Miles' face, which had just softened, darkened again. I flicked my hair and was about to continue. Third. Enough. Marlon, who had been silent from the beginning to the end, suddenly spoke up and broke the silence. Rose, come with me. We need to have a good talk. I sat on the chair, and a sharp pain stabbed at my heart. What was there to talk about? I had known Marlon for 14 years, and I had countless times wanted to have a good talk with him. But he had only left me with one cold back after another. Now he wanted to talk. Unfortunately, there was no chance anymore. I went on talking to myself. Third, those who speculate that my grandmother deliberately deceived us into the marriage can stop. I already told Ms. Miles yesterday. The marriage between me and Marlon is off. Ms. Miles, isn't that right? Ms. Miles' face turned pale. Her usually dignified and noble face now showed a bit of embarrassment. The room was filled with silence, and the guests left in twos and threes under Ms. Mary's signal. Only the three of us were left in the room. Marlon's face was pale, and his voice trembled slightly. Rose, what you just said, it's all out of anger, right? I didn't answer. I glanced at him and turned towards the door. The driver was already waiting outside. I walked quickly and left Marlon's shouts far behind. Driver, let's go. Rose, don't leave. The moment I closed the door, a hand with distinct knuckles squeezed in. A low groan came from outside the car. Are you crazy? I instinctively let go of my hand. Marlon's palm was bruised and purple in the middle, but he seemed not to feel the pain and still pressed firmly against the car door. Seeing that I was staring at his hand, Marlon forced a bitter smile, and there was a pathological persistence in his eyes. Rose, have you calmed down a bit now? What answered him was the loud bang of the car door closing. In the rearview mirror, Marlon's smile froze on his face, and his figure became smaller and smaller. He didn't chase after me. He just stood there, like a statue being washed by the rain. Life in California was much more pleasant than I had imagined. Teresa and I opened a fashion design studio together. In the afterglow of the setting sun, we lay on the beach, admiring the handsome guys with 8-pack abs, and we justified it by saying that we were getting familiar with the human body structure. I just didn't expect that Marlon would still come looking for me. At the entrance of the studio, a man in a black suit was leaning against the wall, with a cold and aloof expression, which made many girls turn their heads frequently. When he saw me, he quickly extinguished the cigarette in his hand and said in a hoarse voice, Rose, long time no see. Actually, it hadn't been that long. It had only been a month since our last meeting. I didn't answer and walked straight past him. Marlon reached out and grabbed my shoulder, his eyes full of anxiety and regret. Rose, give me a chance to explain. Things aren't as you think. I was curious about what kind of explanation Marlon would give me. In the studio, Marlon looked around at my works with a complicated expression. Rose, did you design all these? Can I interrupted him. Get to the point. Marlon was a bit embarrassed, but seeing my impatient look, he didn't dare to say anything else. After a long while, he slowly said, Rose, I was really wrong that day in the bar, but it was because Irene was there. You know, my father's car accident back then was very strange. There were rumors that the Sue family was behind it. But because there was no evidence, it was finally treated as a traffic accident. I got close to Irene just to see if I could find something from her. Marlon babbled on a lot. From the first time he met Irene, to how he got the evidence to bring down the Sue family, and then to how he didn't tell me the truth to protect me. But gradually, his voice got softer and softer, because he noticed that there was not the slightest change in my expression. Rose, what's wrong with you? I had a calm expression. But the words I said were like a thunderclap in Marlon's ear. I already know all the things you've said. I'm not a fool. Having lived in the Miles family for so many years, I even know some things better than Marlon himself. I know the knot that Marlon has been obsessed with for years. I can see the gloomy look in his eyes when he's with Irene. From beginning to end, I've understood that Marlon would have an unending feud with the Sue family. The one who didn't understand was Marlon. He stared at me intently, his pupils contracting slightly, as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. Rose, what did you say? I took a deep breath, not wanting to recall those painful times. Marlon, the person who made me want to leave wasn't Irene. It was you. I did like you, but all you gave me was day after day of indifference. I also thought that since you didn't reject me, It meant that my love might touch your heart someday. But on that day in the bar, you made me realize a fact. Even if we really got married, I wouldn't be happy. Because the biggest problem between us isn't that you don't love me, but you simply don't respect me. That's not true. Marlon's face turned pale, and he retorted feebly, Rose, it's not like that. It's not like that. I just don't know how to love someone. Is it that you don't know how to love someone? Or that you don't know how to love someone of a low status? Someone whose love you feel ashamed of? Over the years, I had lived in fear and unease because of Marlon's indifference. But every time I wanted to give up, I would waver at the slightest bit of love he showed and fall into deeper self-doubt. It was not until that day, when I stood in the bar and tasted the saltiness of my tears, that I suddenly realized he really loved me. He was angry that he actually loved someone like me in public. Teresa and I continued our routine of working during the day and going to the beach to study at dusk. Marlon settled down nearby and waited at the entrance of the studio every day. He didn't dare to come in and would just follow us from a distance when Teresa and I went out. Sometimes, when he saw that we were chatting happily, he would tentatively insert a few dry words. When he saw my suddenly cold expression, he would retreat to the side in silence. On the beach, the tide came in waves. The lights of the Santa Monica Pier in the distance twinkled. Teresa raised her eyebrows and gestured. Rose, look at him. He looks so pitiful. I followed her gaze. Marlon was sitting alone on the steps, and his back looked especially thin in the twilight. Noticing my gaze, he forced a flattering smile. He did look pitiful, but compared to the cold treatment and disdain I had received over the years, what did it matter? Suddenly, his smile froze, and his pupils contracted sharply. Bang! A sharp gunshot shattered the tranquility. The crowd started to stir. Rose, a familiar voice tore through the air. I turned around in a daze and saw Marlon running towards me with almost all his strength. He pressed heavily on me. A strong smell of blood wafted over, and warm liquid soaked through my shirt. Marlon. I tried to get up to check his injury, but he held me down. Don't move. His voice was very soft, but the strength in his hand was astonishing. Rose, don't get up. It's still not safe. The pungent smell of disinfectant in the hospital filled the air. I looked at Marlon lying in the hospital bed with mixed feelings. Have something to drink. Teresa handed me a cup of coffee and sat down on the chair beside me, looking a bit hesitant. Rose, do you and Marlon want to have a good talk again? I looked down at the tip of my shoe, and the scene on the beach came back to my mind. Teresa, you know what? When Marlon pounced on me, I felt grateful, scared, and surprised. I took a deep breath, but the only thing I didn't feel was heartache. Before, not to mention getting shot. Even if he just scraped his hand while playing basketball, I would be extremely heartbroken. Teresa, he and I really can't go back to the way we were. Before I could finish speaking, there was a soft sound in the ward. I instinctively looked towards the hospital bed. Marlon had woken up at some point and was looking straight at me, his eyes filled with tears. He opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something, but only let out a sob. Marlon. I opened my mouth, not knowing whether I should thank him first or tell him that it was impossible for us to be together anymore. Marlon raised his hand to stop me and forced a smile that was uglier than a cry. Rose, promise me one thing. When you get married, don't send me an invitation. The ward was terrifyingly quiet, with only the ticking of the medical equipment echoing. Marlon turned his head to look out the window. After a long while, his hoarse voice sounded again. Rose, we're even now. The people from the Miles family will be here soon. You should go. I looked at his pale face and was taken aback for a moment. Your injury. Anyway, you saved me. Just go. Marlon interrupted me, his voice trembling slightly. Leave me alone for a while. I took one last look at him, opened the door, and walked forward with big strides, not looking back. The end.